Hey y'all. Recently I noticed some discussion about the Achaemenid Empire and slavery. And a lot of people are making the claim that they didn't practice slavery. And I'm going to come out and say it. Unfortunately, that's not true. They didn't practice slavery. But I did kind of want to break it down. Because a lot of times the people who are making the claim that they didn't have any slaves, they're making it as a counterpoint to the people saying that, oh, it was an empire of slavers, which was popularized by the film 300, which while cool looking is not, it has its many, many issues. But when we go to Persia itself, because remember the Achaemenids, they were Persian, we didn't really see that much slavery. That isn't to say they didn't have slaves, but we didn't see it as widely practiced. And another thing to note, it wasn't institutionalized in Persia. They didn't really have slave codes. But when we go to areas like Babylon and Egypt, which were conquered by the Achaemenids, we did see slave codes, slave laws. But these were like bleed-throughs because the Persians, they allowed governance. They just had to pay their taxes, all that stuff, and obey the Persians. But generally, those conquered city-states, they could govern themselves. So that was probably a bleed through. Why we still see a lot of slavery in Egypt and Babylon, which were controlled by the Achaemenids. I will say this as well. I do want to point out that when a city would revolt against their local rulers, generally that population would be sold into slavery. Now, this was a very common practice in the ancient world. I'm not making this as an excuse because slavery is still slavery, but I do just want to point that out. I will say this, though, for the Achaemenids, we see that debt slavery was just about abolished. If not a law, it was generally not used anymore. Debt slavery is like, let's say I owe someone money and I can't afford to pay them back. Well, that person could sell me off as a slave to recuperate his lost money, or I could sell myself as a slave to get money. Now, if you did owe someone money, they could sell your kids as slaves, but not you. Which, still selling your kids as slavery isn't cool, but, progress, I guess. I will say this, though, for the Achaemenids. Very unique in this regard. Their agricultural system did not rely on slaves. Rather, it was done by hired labor or free laborers. Which we can't say the same thing for the Greeks, because the Greeks, especially when you go to places like Athens, but especially Sparta, their agricultural system depended on slaves. If they had slaves, their society would be completely different. Because Spartans, they owned the land, but they would have the slaves work it. The Spartans would instead spend their time, and the Athens as well, they would spend their times in the government or out fighting. So, slavery is still bad, but a slave was probably treated better in ancient Persia than they were in ancient Greek. So, I'm going to talk about this more probably later. It's a pretty interesting subject. It's hard to talk about the economic, agricultural, and societal reasons why people had slaves. Anyway, continue wasting more time on TikTok. See you later. Bye.